Question 1. Stakeholder feedback indicates that during a recent chemical spill incident at the facility, the initial communication to employees and the local community was perceived as vague and slow, leading to confusion and anxiety. As the certified safety director, what is the most appropriate immediate action to address this feedback and improve future crisis communication protocols? Option A. Issue a public apology for the communication shortcomings and immediately implement a new, more aggressive social media campaign to disseminate information during future incidents. Option B. Focus on enhancing the technical aspects of the spill containment and cleanup, assuming that effective communication will naturally follow once the immediate physical threat is resolved. Option C. Conduct a thorough investigation into the specific individuals responsible for the communication delays and implement disciplinary actions to prevent recurrence. Option D. Convene an emergency meeting with the crisis management team to review the incident response, specifically analyzing the communication timeline, content, and channels used, and to revise the crisis communication plan based on lessons learned. Correct answer is D. Convene an emergency meeting with the crisis management team to review the incident response, specifically analyzing the communication timeline, content, and channels used, and to revise the crisis communication plan based on lessons learned. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires immediate, accurate, and sensitive communication to multiple, potentially diverse stakeholder groups during a critical incident. The Certified Safety Director, CSD, must balance the need for transparency with the potential for panic or misinformation, all while adhering to established emergency response protocols and legal obligations. The speed of information dissemination, the accuracy of the details provided, and the tone of the communication are paramount. The correct approach involves establishing a clear, consistent, and factual communication channel, prioritizing the safety and well-being of affected individuals, and providing actionable information. This aligns with the principles of crisis management and ethical communication, which emphasize truthfulness, empathy, and responsibility. Specifically, regulatory frameworks governing emergency preparedness and response, such as those outlined by OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, in the U.S., mandate timely and effective communication to employees and relevant authorities during incidents that pose a threat to health and safety. Ethical guidelines for safety professionals also stress the importance of clear, honest communication to build trust and ensure appropriate actions are taken. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on damage control without providing essential safety information fails to meet regulatory requirements for hazard communication and employee safety. It risks undermining trust and preventing individuals from taking necessary protective measures. Another incorrect approach that disseminates unverified or speculative information can lead to widespread panic, misinformation, and potentially legal liabilities for the organization. This violates the principle of accuracy and can exacerbate the crisis. A third incorrect approach that delays communication until all details are confirmed, while seemingly cautious, can be detrimental in a rapidly evolving situation. This delay can lead to rumors, increased anxiety, and a loss of confidence in the organization's ability to manage the crisis effectively, potentially contravening the spirit of prompt notification required in many emergency regulations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that includes 1. Immediate assessment of the situation and identification of critical information to be communicated. 2. Activation of the pre-established crisis communication plan. 3. Identification of key stakeholders and tailoring messages to their specific needs and concerns. 4. Ensuring all communications are factual, clear, and empathetic. And 5. Establishing a feedback loop to monitor the effectiveness of communication and address emerging concerns. Question 2. Process analysis reveals that the company is planning a significant upgrade to its manufacturing equipment and the introduction of a new chemical solvent. Which training needs assessment approach will best ensure that the workforce is prepared for potential new hazards and remains compliant with safety regulations before these changes are fully implemented? Option A. Reliance on employee self-reporting of training needs. Option B. Impact assessment. Option C. Prioritization of immediate operational needs. Option D. Analysis of past incident reports. Correct answer is B. Impact assessment. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a certified safety director, CSD, to move beyond a reactive approach to safety training and proactively identify potential future risks based on evolving operational demands. The challenge lies in accurately forecasting training needs before incidents occur or regulatory changes mandate them, ensuring the organization remains compliant and its workforce is adequately prepared for emerging hazards. This requires a forward-thinking perspective grounded in a thorough understanding of the organization's strategic direction and potential operational shifts. The correct approach, impact assessment, is right because it aligns with the proactive and preventative principles mandated by regulatory frameworks such as OSHA General Duty Clause 29 CFR 1910, 1450, which implies a need for training to address recognized hazards, and the general intent of various industry-specific standards that emphasize anticipating and mitigating risks. An impact assessment systematically evaluates how proposed changes in operations, technology, or work processes might introduce new hazards or alter existing ones, thereby dictating specific training requirements. This approach ensures that training is directly linked to potential future impacts on worker safety and health, making it a highly effective and compliant method for determining training needs. It moves beyond simply reacting to past incidents or current requirements. An approach that focuses solely on past incident reports is incorrect because it is reactive. While valuable for identifying current gaps, it fails to anticipate future risks associated with planned changes. Relying only on past incidents can lead to a training program that is always playing catch-up, potentially leaving workers exposed to new hazards before adequate training is provided. This falls short of the proactive safety culture expected of a CSD and may not fully satisfy the recognized hazards aspect of regulatory compliance. An approach that prioritizes only immediate operational needs is also incorrect. While essential for day-to-day functioning, this narrow focus neglects the strategic and long-term safety implications of organizational evolution. It risks overlooking training requirements for emerging technologies or process modifications that may not have immediate, visible impacts, but could lead to significant future risks. This can create compliance gaps and compromise the long-term safety of the workforce. An approach that relies exclusively on employee self-reporting of training needs is insufficient. While employee input is valuable, it may not capture all potential hazards or the full scope of training required to address them, especially concerning complex or less obvious risks. Furthermore, employees may not be aware of all potential future hazards or the specific training needed to mitigate them, making this method incomplete for a comprehensive training needs assessment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a multifaceted approach. A CSD should first understand the organization's strategic objectives and upcoming changes. Then, it should employ methods like impact assessment to proactively identify potential hazards and training needs arising from these changes. This should be supplemented by analyzing past incident data to address existing deficiencies and incorporating employee feedback to ensure practical relevance. The ultimate goal is to create a dynamic and forward-looking training program that anticipates and mitigates risks, ensuring continuous compliance and a robust safety culture. Question 3. Consider a scenario where a production supervisor requests an immediate, temporary deviation from an established safe work procedure, SWP, for a critical task, citing an urgent production deadline. The supervisor proposes a minor alteration to the sequence of steps, believing it will save approximately 15 minutes per unit. As the Certified Safety Director, CSD, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure both operational needs and regulatory compliance are met? Option A. Allow the supervisor to implement the proposed change without formal documentation or additional training, assuming the workers are experienced and understand the risks. Option B. Immediately approve the supervisor's request to save time, as operational deadlines are often critical and the proposed change is minor. Option C. Refuse the supervisor's request outright, stating that SWPs cannot be altered under any circumstances, and insist that the original procedure must be followed regardless of the production impact. Option D. Conduct a rapid, documented risk assessment of the proposed deviation, identify any new hazards, develop interim control measures if necessary, and formally approve the temporary modification with clear communication and training for affected personnel before it is implemented. The correct answer is D. Conduct a rapid, documented risk assessment of the proposed deviation, identify any new hazards, develop interim control measures if necessary, and formally approve the temporary modification with clear communication and training for affected personnel before it is implemented. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a certified safety director, CSD, to balance the immediate need for operational efficiency with the fundamental legal and ethical obligation to protect workers. The CSD must ensure that any deviation from established safe work procedures, SWP, is not only justified but also rigorously controlled to prevent foreseeable harm. The challenge lies in recognizing that while SWPs are designed for safety, operational pressures can lead to attempts to bypass them, necessitating a strong, evidence-based, and legally compliant response. Careful judgment is required to assess the risks associated with any proposed modification and to ensure that the integrity of safety protocols is maintained. The correct approach involves a systematic, documented process of risk assessment and management when considering modifications to SWPs. This entails a thorough review of the proposed change, an evaluation of potential new hazards introduced, and the development of specific control measures to mitigate those risks. Crucially, any revised procedure must be formally approved, communicated to all affected personnel, and training provided before implementation. This aligns with the principles of proactive risk management mandated by regulatory frameworks such as OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, in the U.S., which requires employers to identify and control workplace hazards. Specifically, OSHA General Duty Clause Section 5(a)(1) of the OSH Act obligates employers to provide a workplace free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm. Developing and implementing SWPs, and critically, managing their modification, is a core component of fulfilling this obligation. Ethically, this approach upholds the CSD's responsibility to prioritize worker well-being over short-term operational gains. An incorrect approach that involves immediately approving the supervisor's request without a formal risk assessment fails to uphold regulatory requirements. This bypasses the essential step of hazard identification and control, directly violating the principles of OSHA hazard communication standards and the requirement for documented safety procedures. It creates an environment where ad hoc safety decisions can lead to unforeseen incidents, exposing both the company and the CSD to legal liability and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the supervisor's request outright without any consideration or discussion, is also professionally unsound. While maintaining safety is paramount, a rigid refusal without exploring potential valid operational needs or collaboratively finding safe alternatives can foster resentment and undermine the safety culture. It fails to engage stakeholders in the safety process, which is crucial for buy-in and continuous improvement. While not a direct regulatory violation in itself, it hinders the collaborative development and effective implementation of safety measures, which is an implicit expectation of a safety professional. A third incorrect approach, which is to implement the supervisor's suggested modification without documenting the change or providing updated training, represents a significant regulatory failure. This creates a discrepancy between the documented SWP and the actual work being performed, making it impossible to effectively audit or enforce safety standards. It also leaves workers vulnerable as they may not be aware of the new risks or the correct procedures to follow, directly contravening OSHA requirements for training and hazard communication. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Acknowledge and listen to the operational concern or proposed change. 2. Initiate a formal risk assessment process for the proposed modification. 3. Identify all potential hazards associated with the change. 4. Develop and document specific control measures and revised procedures. 5. Obtain necessary approvals for the revised SWP. 6. Communicate the changes and provide adequate training to all affected employees. 7. Monitor the effectiveness of the revised SWP. This systematic process ensures that safety is integrated into operational decisions, rather than being an afterthought, and that all actions are compliant with regulatory mandates and ethical responsibilities. Question 4. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent pattern of minor safety protocol deviations across several work areas, impacting team morale and perceived effectiveness of safety initiatives. As the certified safety director, Which approach would be most effective in leading and motivating the safety team to address these issues proactively and sustainably? Option A. Facilitate a series of workshops with the safety team to collaboratively analyze the deviation patterns, identify root causes, and co-develop practical, team-driven solutions and revise training modules. Option B. Engage an external safety consulting firm to conduct a comprehensive review of all safety procedures and implement their recommended changes across the organization. Option C. Issue a directive to all work areas outlining updated safety procedures and mandating immediate adherence, with a follow-up audit scheduled in 1 month. Option D. Implement a stricter disciplinary policy for any further deviations identified by the monitoring system, coupled with mandatory retraining for all involved personnel. The correct answer is A. Facilitate a series of workshops with the safety team to collaboratively analyze the deviation patterns, identify root causes, and co-develop practical, team-driven solutions and revise training modules. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a certified safety director, CSD, to navigate the complexities of human motivation within a regulatory framework that mandates proactive safety measures. The CSD must not only identify performance gaps, but also implement strategies that foster genuine engagement and ownership of safety protocols among diverse stakeholders, including frontline workers and management. This goes beyond mere compliance. It involves cultivating a robust safety culture. The correct approach involves actively involving the safety team in developing and implementing solutions. This aligns with the principles of collaborative safety management, which is implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks that emphasize worker participation and consultation. By empowering the team to identify root causes and propose corrective actions, the CSD fosters a sense of ownership and accountability. This approach is ethically sound as it respects the expertise of those closest to the work, and is practically effective in driving sustainable safety improvements, as it leverages intrinsic motivation. Regulatory guidance often encourages such participatory approaches to ensure that safety measures are practical and effectively implemented. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on punitive measures for non-compliance fails to address the underlying reasons for the observed safety lapses. This can lead to a culture of fear and resentment, where workers may hide incidents rather than report them, thereby undermining the very purpose of the monitoring system. Ethically, it is a superficial response that does not promote genuine safety commitment. From a regulatory perspective, while disciplinary action may be a component of a safety program, it should not be the sole or primary motivator, as it can be counterproductive to fostering a proactive safety culture mandated by many regulations. Another incorrect approach that relies on top-down directives without seeking input from the safety team overlooks valuable frontline knowledge. This can result in solutions that are impractical or fail to address the actual hazards. Ethically, it disregards the contributions and perspectives of the team members responsible for implementing safety practices. Regulatory frameworks often advocate for consultation and involvement of workers in safety matters, making this approach less effective and potentially non-compliant with the spirit of such regulations. A third incorrect approach that involves external consultants to solely redesign procedures without team involvement misses an opportunity to build internal capacity and ownership. While external expertise can be valuable, relying on it exclusively can create dependency and fail to embed a sustainable safety culture within the organization. Ethically, it may not be the most responsible use of resources if internal capabilities can be developed. Regulatory expectations often lean towards building internal competency and fostering self-sufficiency in safety management. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough analysis of the monitoring data to understand the nature and extent of the safety performance issues. This should be followed by open communication and consultation with the safety team and other relevant stakeholders to gather insights into the root causes. Solutions should then be collaboratively developed, prioritizing engagement, empowerment, and continuous improvement, while ensuring alignment with all applicable regulatory requirements. Question 5. Quality control measures reveal that the current hazard control strategy for a chemical handling process relies heavily on detailed operating procedures and the mandatory use of specific personal protective equipment, PPE, by all personnel involved. While these elements are documented and training records are up to date, There is no evidence of recent assessments to determine if engineering controls, such as local exhaust ventilation or process enclosure, have been considered or implemented to minimize exposure at the source. Which of the following best represents the most effective and compliant approach to evaluating and improving this hazard control strategy? A. Conduct a thorough review of the existing operating procedures and PPE effectiveness, ensuring compliance with training mandates, and updating them as necessary to reflect current best practices in PPE selection and use. B. Initiate a comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes the elimination or substitution of hazardous chemicals, followed by the evaluation and implementation of engineering controls, before relying on administrative controls and PPE. C. Focus on enhancing the enforcement of existing procedures and PPE usage through increased supervision and disciplinary actions for noncompliance, as the current documented strategy is deemed sufficient. D. Engage a third-party consultant to audit the current safety program, with a primary objective of identifying cost-saving opportunities in PPE procurement and training delivery. Option A. Focus on enhancing the enforcement of existing procedures and PPE usage through increased supervision and disciplinary actions for noncompliance, as the current documented strategy is deemed sufficient. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the existing operating procedures and PPE effectiveness, ensuring compliance with training mandates, and updating them as necessary to reflect current best practices in PPE selection and use. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes the elimination or substitution of hazardous chemicals, followed by the evaluation and implementation of engineering controls, before relying on administrative controls and PPE. Option D. Engage a third-party consultant to audit the current safety program, with a primary objective of identifying cost-saving opportunities in PPE procurement and training delivery. Correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of the existing operating procedures and PPE effectiveness, ensuring compliance with training mandates and updating them as necessary to reflect current best practices in PPE selection and use. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the Certified Safety Director, CSD, must evaluate the effectiveness of existing hazard control strategies in a real-world operational context, ensuring compliance with the specified regulatory framework. The challenge lies in moving beyond superficial checks to a deep understanding of how controls are implemented, their actual impact on risk reduction, and their alignment with the hierarchy of controls. Careful judgment is required to identify subtle deficiencies and propose improvements that are both effective and practical. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the hazard control strategy, focusing on its effectiveness in eliminating or reducing risks to an acceptable level, prioritizing elimination and substitution as per the hierarchy of controls. This aligns with the fundamental principles of occupational safety and health regulations, which mandate employers to implement controls that are as effective as reasonably practicable. The ethical imperative is to protect worker well-being by ensuring that control measures are not merely present, but are demonstrably reducing hazards. An incorrect approach that relies solely on documented procedures without verifying their implementation and effectiveness fails to meet regulatory requirements. Regulations typically require not just the existence of a safety program, but its active and effective application. This approach risks creating a false sense of security and can lead to regulatory noncompliance if an incident occurs. Another incorrect approach that focuses on administrative controls and personal protective equipment, PPE, as the primary means of hazard mitigation, without first exploring engineering or substitution controls, violates the established hierarchy of controls. This hierarchy is a cornerstone of effective risk management, prioritizing more robust and reliable control measures. Relying on less effective controls can be deemed a failure to exercise due diligence and may result in increased residual risk, potentially leading to breaches of duty of care. A further incorrect approach that prioritizes cost-effectiveness over the demonstrable effectiveness of hazard controls is ethically and regulatorily unsound. While resource management is important, it cannot supersede the primary obligation to ensure a safe working environment. Regulations and ethical codes consistently emphasize that the cost of preventing harm should not be a barrier to implementing necessary safety measures. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. understanding the specific regulatory requirements and the hierarchy of controls. 2. Conducting a thorough assessment of existing controls, including site inspections, worker interviews, and review of incident data. 3. Evaluating controls against the hierarchy, prioritizing elimination and substitution. 4. Verifying the effectiveness of implemented controls through objective evidence. 5. Documenting findings and proposing improvements that are technically sound, practically implementable, and compliant with regulations. Question 6. The assessment process reveals that the annual safety budget has been significantly reduced due to broader organizational financial pressures. Several proposed safety initiatives, including enhanced hazard communication training for a new chemical process, upgrades to emergency eyewash stations, and a pilot program for advanced fatigue management monitoring, are now at risk of being unfunded or significantly scaled back. As the certified safety director, you must decide how to allocate the remaining funds. Which of the following approaches best upholds your professional responsibilities and regulatory obligations? Option A. Prioritize funding for initiatives that address the most severe potential hazards and are mandated by current regulations, while seeking to phase in other initiatives as budget allows and exploring cost-effective alternatives for those that cannot be fully funded. Option B. Allocate funds to the initiatives that are most visible to employees and management, as these tend to have the greatest perceived impact on safety culture, even if they don't address the highest risks. Option C. Defer all non-essential safety expenditures, including the pilot fatigue management program and eyewash station upgrades, until the next fiscal year, focusing only on immediate compliance issues. Option D. Reduce the scope of all proposed safety initiatives proportionally to fit within the reduced budget, ensuring that every area receives some funding, even if it means diluting the effectiveness of each program. The correct answer is A. Prioritize funding for initiatives that address the most severe potential hazards and are mandated by current regulations, while seeking to phase in other initiatives as budget allows and exploring cost-effective alternatives for those that cannot be fully funded. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common and ethically challenging situation for a certified safety director, CSD. The core of the dilemma lies in balancing the imperative to maintain a robust safety program with the reality of limited financial resources. This scenario is professionally challenging because it forces a decision maker to prioritize safety initiatives, potentially leading to the deferral or reduction of certain activities, which could, in turn, impact the overall effectiveness of the safety management system. Careful judgment is required to ensure that critical safety functions are not compromised, while still operating within budgetary constraints. The correct approach involves a systematic and data-driven prioritization of safety initiatives. This means evaluating each proposed safety expenditure based on its potential to mitigate the most significant risks, its legal or regulatory compliance requirements, and its impact on preventing serious injuries or fatalities. A CSD must advocate for the resources necessary to address high-priority risks, leveraging data from incident investigation, risk assessments, and regulatory requirements to justify these needs. This approach aligns with the fundamental ethical duty of a safety professional to protect workers and the public, and it is supported by regulatory frameworks that mandate proactive risk management and the implementation of effective safety programs. For example, under U.S. OSHA regulations, employers have a general duty to provide a workplace free from recognized hazards, which necessitates allocating resources to address identified risks. An incorrect approach would be to arbitrarily cut funding from less visible or seemingly less critical safety programs without a thorough risk assessment. This could lead to a decline in safety performance over time as minor issues escalate or as the cumulative effect of reduced oversight in certain areas takes hold. Ethically, this fails to uphold the duty of care owed to employees. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize initiatives based solely on their visibility or the ease of implementation, rather than their actual risk reduction potential. This might lead to spending on feel-good safety measures that do not address the most significant hazards, thereby misallocating scarce resources and failing to meet the core objectives of a safety program. This is a failure to adhere to the principles of effective risk management, which are central to regulatory compliance and professional safety practice. A further incorrect approach is to defer all non-essential safety expenditures indefinitely, hoping for future budget increases. While some deferral might be necessary, A complete halt to proactive safety improvements or necessary upgrades can create a backlog of risks that become more difficult and costly to address later, and it can signal a lack of commitment to safety from leadership. This can also lead to noncompliance with evolving regulatory standards. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. A comprehensive understanding of all identified risks and their potential severity. 2. A thorough review of all proposed safety initiatives and their expected outcomes. 3. Prioritization of initiatives based on risk reduction, regulatory compliance, and potential for preventing serious harm. 4. Clear communication with senior management, presenting data-driven justifications for resource needs and outlining the consequences of underfunding critical safety areas. 5. Exploring alternative, cost-effective solutions where possible without compromising safety. Question 7. The audit findings indicate a significant disconnect between documented safety procedures and actual workplace practices, suggesting that safety is not consistently prioritized or integrated into daily operations. As the certified safety director, what is the most effective strategy to address this cultural deficit and foster a truly embedded safety culture? Option A. Initiate a disciplinary process for all employees identified as not adhering to safety procedures during the audit. Option B. Allocate additional resources to the safety department to increase the frequency of safety inspections and audits. Option C. Develop and implement a comprehensive safety culture program that includes visible leadership commitment, clear communication of safety expectations, employee engagement in safety initiatives, and integration of safety into performance management systems. Option D. Conduct a thorough review and update of all existing safety procedures and policies to ensure they are current and compliant with all applicable regulations. The correct answer is C. Develop and implement a comprehensive safety culture program that includes visible leadership commitment, clear communication of safety expectations, employee engagement in safety initiatives, and integration of safety into performance management systems. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the Certified Safety Director, CSD, to move beyond mere compliance with regulations and actively foster a proactive safety culture. The audit findings suggest a systemic issue where safety is perceived as an add-on rather than an integral part of operations, leading to potential noncompliance and increased risk. The CSD must demonstrate leadership and strategic thinking to embed safety into the organizational DNA, which involves influencing behavior, communication, and resource allocation across all levels. The correct approach involves developing and implementing a comprehensive strategy that integrates safety into all organizational processes and decision-making. This includes visible leadership commitment, clear communication of safety expectations, provision of adequate resources for safety initiatives, and empowering employees to participate in safety management. This aligns with the principles of a robust safety management system, which, under general occupational safety and health frameworks, emphasizes the importance of management commitment and worker participation in achieving a safe working environment. Ethically, this approach prioritizes the well-being of all individuals within the organization, fulfilling the CSD's duty of care. An approach that focuses solely on updating written procedures without addressing the underlying cultural issues is incorrect. This fails to recognize that procedures are ineffective if not understood, embraced, and followed by employees. It represents a superficial response that does not tackle the root cause of the audit findings and risks continued noncompliance and accidents. Such an approach neglects the human element of safety and the importance of behavioral change, which is a critical component of effective safety management. Another incorrect approach would be to blame individual employees for the findings. This is a punitive and counterproductive strategy that fosters fear and discourages reporting of hazards or near misses. It shifts responsibility away from management and systemic issues, undermining the development of a trusting and open safety culture. This approach is ethically unsound, as it fails to acknowledge the role of organizational systems and leadership in shaping employee behavior and safety outcomes. A third incorrect approach would be to delegate all safety responsibilities to the safety department without securing buy-in from other departments or senior management. This creates a siloed approach to safety, where it is seen as the sole domain of the safety professionals rather than a shared responsibility. This limits the integration of safety into operational planning and decision-making, and it fails to leverage the expertise and influence of other functional areas in promoting a strong safety culture. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough root cause analysis of the audit findings, followed by the development of a strategic plan that addresses both procedural and cultural aspects of safety. This plan should be developed collaboratively with input from various stakeholders, including senior management, line managers, and employees. The CSD should then champion the implementation of this plan, ensuring adequate resources, ongoing communication, and continuous monitoring and improvement. This systematic and inclusive approach ensures that safety becomes an embedded value, not just a set of rules. Question 8. The control framework reveals that a new manufacturing process has been introduced, which utilizes novel chemical compounds and automated machinery. The CSD is tasked with ensuring the safety of this new process. What is the most appropriate initial step to guarantee legal compliance and worker protection? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive legal impact assessment to identify all applicable regulations and determine how the new process aligns with or deviates from them, specifying necessary controls. Option B. Rely primarily on the safety guidelines provided by the manufacturer of the new chemical compounds and machinery, assuming they meet all necessary standards. Option C. Implement the new process immediately and monitor for any safety incidents, addressing them reactively as they arise. Option D. Prioritize the cost-effectiveness and efficiency gains of the new process, addressing safety concerns only if they become a significant operational impediment. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive legal impact assessment to identify all applicable regulations and determine how the new process aligns with or deviates from them, specifying necessary controls. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for a Certified Safety Director (CSD), where a new process introduces potential hazards that have not been fully assessed against existing regulatory requirements. The challenge lies in balancing the need for operational efficiency with the absolute legal mandate to ensure worker safety and compliance. A CSD must exercise sound professional judgment to prevent potential harm and avoid legal repercussions for the organization. The pressure to implement new technologies quickly can sometimes overshadow thorough safety evaluations, creating a high-stakes environment where proactive risk management is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive legal impact assessment of the new process. This means systematically identifying all relevant legal and regulatory requirements, e.g., OSHA standards in the U.S., HSE regulations in the U.K., or relevant state/territory legislation in Australia, depending on the specified jurisdiction for the CSD exam, that apply to the identified hazards. The assessment would then evaluate how the new process aligns with or deviates from these requirements, determining the necessary controls to achieve compliance. This proactive, legally grounded approach ensures that safety measures are not an afterthought but are integrated into the process design from the outset, fulfilling the CSD's duty of care and legal obligations. For a U.S.-based CSD exam, this would involve referencing specific OSHA standards like the General Duty Clause Section 5(a)(1) of the OSH Act, and any applicable specific standards related to the process's hazards, e.g., process safety management, hazard communication. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the new process without a formal legal impact assessment, relying solely on the manufacturer's safety recommendations, is a significant regulatory failure. Manufacturer recommendations, while valuable, do not absolve the employer of their legal responsibility to ensure compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. This approach risks overlooking jurisdiction-specific requirements or hazards not adequately addressed by the manufacturer. Adopting a wait-and-see approach, where safety measures are only implemented after an incident occurs, is a severe ethical and regulatory failure. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the proactive safety obligations mandated by law. Such an approach can lead to severe penalties, legal liability, and most importantly, worker injury or fatality. Focusing solely on the cost-effectiveness of the new process without a thorough safety and legal review is also an unacceptable approach. While financial considerations are part of business operations, they can never supersede legal requirements for worker safety. This approach prioritizes profit over people, which is a direct violation of safety legislation and ethical principles. Professional reasoning. A CSD should always begin by understanding the legal landscape relevant to any new operation or process. The decision-making process should involve 1. Hazard identification. Identify potential hazards associated with the new process. 2. Regulatory identification. Determine all applicable legal and regulatory frameworks. 3. Impact assessment. Systematically evaluate how the new process interacts with these regulations. 4. Control measure development. Design and implement controls to ensure compliance and mitigate risks. 5. Documentation and review. Maintain records of the assessment and controls and periodically review their effectiveness. This structured approach ensures that legal obligations are met proactively, safeguarding both employees and the organization. Question 9. The evaluation methodology shows that a mandatory hazard communication training program, critical for ensuring compliance with workplace safety standards, is experiencing low employee engagement and poor knowledge retention, as evidenced by post-training assessments and supervisor feedback. As the Certified Safety Director, what is the most appropriate course of action to address this deficiency? Option A. Increase the frequency of the current hazard communication training sessions to ensure employees are exposed to the material more often. Option B. Document that the training has been delivered as scheduled and consider the compliance requirement met, despite the feedback on engagement and retention. Option C. Advise management that the current training is sufficient for regulatory purposes and that employee feedback on engagement is not a primary concern for compliance. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the existing training materials and delivery methods, seeking employee input to redesign the program for better engagement and comprehension, and then reevaluate its effectiveness. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of the existing training materials and delivery methods, seeking employee input to redesign the program for better engagement and comprehension, and then reevaluate its effectiveness. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for a Certified Safety Director, CSD, where a critical safety training program, mandated by regulatory requirements, has been identified as potentially ineffective due to low engagement and comprehension. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for regulatory compliance with the ethical imperative to ensure genuine worker safety and understanding, rather than merely ticking a box. A superficial approach could lead to continued risks, while an overly disruptive or costly approach might be unsustainable. Careful judgment is required to identify a solution that is both compliant and effective in fostering a safe work environment. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review and revision of the training program, focusing on adult learning principles and incorporating feedback from the target audience. This demonstrates a commitment to proactive safety management and a deep understanding of the underlying principles of effective safety education, which is a core responsibility of a CSD. Specifically, this approach aligns with the principles of continuous improvement in safety management systems, often implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory frameworks that emphasize hazard identification, risk assessment, and control measures, including effective training. The ethical justification stems from the duty of care owed to employees, ensuring they possess the knowledge and skills to perform their jobs safely. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on increasing the frequency of the existing, ineffective training fails to address the root cause of the problem: the training's lack of engagement and comprehension. This is a regulatory failure because it does not ensure that the training is effective in imparting necessary safety knowledge, merely that it is delivered. Ethically, it represents a disregard for the well-being of employees by providing potentially useless information. Another incorrect approach, which involves simply documenting that the training was delivered without verifying comprehension, is a direct violation of the spirit, if not the letter, of many safety regulations that require demonstrable competency. This approach prioritizes administrative compliance over actual safety outcomes, which is ethically unsound and can lead to significant legal and financial repercussions if an incident occurs. A third incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the feedback as a minor issue and continue with the current training, demonstrates a lack of commitment to safety leadership and a failure to recognize the potential for serious consequences arising from inadequate safety knowledge. This is both a regulatory and ethical failure, as it neglects a clear indicator of risk and fails to uphold the CSD's responsibility to foster a culture of safety. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Acknowledge and investigate the identified problem thoroughly, gathering data and feedback. 2. Consult relevant regulatory requirements to understand the specific mandates for the training in question. 3. Evaluate the current training's effectiveness against these requirements and best practices in adult education. 4. Develop and propose solutions that address the root causes of ineffectiveness, prioritizing practical application and comprehension. 5. Implement the chosen solution, ensuring adequate resources and support. 6. Monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of the revised training, seeking ongoing feedback for continuous improvement. Question 10. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a significant portion of the production floor staff find the currently mandated eye protection uncomfortable and believe it hinders their ability to perform certain detailed tasks effectively, leading to instances where it is not worn. As the certified safety director, what is the most appropriate course of action to address this situation while ensuring regulatory compliance? Option A. Remove the requirement for eye protection on the production floor, as employee feedback suggests it is not practical for their work. Option B. Procure a new, universally applicable type of eye protection that is perceived as more comfortable by a few vocal employees, without conducting a formal hazard assessment or re-evaluating the original selection criteria. Option C. Immediately issue a directive to all employees that failure to wear the mandated eye protection will result in disciplinary action, and inform them that the current PPE selection is final and non-negotiable. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the hazard assessment for tasks requiring eye protection. Re-evaluate the current PPE selection against those hazards and relevant OSHA standards, e.g., 29 CFR 1910-133, and develop targeted retraining sessions that emphasize the importance of eye protection and demonstrate proper fit and use, while also exploring alternative models that offer improved comfort and fit without compromising protection levels. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of the hazard assessment for tasks requiring eye protection. Re-evaluate the current PPE selection against those hazards and relevant OSHA standards, e.g., 29 CFR 1910-133, and develop targeted retraining sessions that emphasize the importance of eye protection and demonstrate proper fit and use, while also exploring alternative models that offer improved comfort and fit without compromising protection levels. Explanation. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in safety management, balancing regulatory compliance with practical user experience and perceived effectiveness. The professional challenge lies in addressing genuine concerns raised by frontline workers without compromising the established safety protocols or the integrity of the PPE program. A certified safety director must navigate this feedback by understanding the underlying reasons for dissatisfaction, which could range from comfort issues to a misunderstanding of the PPE's purpose, while upholding their responsibility to ensure a safe working environment as mandated by regulations. The correct approach involves a systematic review and re-evaluation of the existing PPE selection and training protocols. This entails gathering specific details about the feedback, such as the types of tasks where PPE is deemed problematic, the nature of the discomfort or perceived ineffectiveness, and the specific PPE items involved. Following this, a review of the original selection process, ensuring it aligned with hazard assessments and regulatory requirements, e.g., OSHA standards in the U.S. for general industry, is crucial. Retraining should then focus on reinforcing the why behind the PPE selection, demonstrating its effectiveness through practical examples or hazard simulations, and exploring potential adjustments to fit or comfort within the bounds of regulatory compliance and hazard mitigation. This approach is ethically sound and legally defensible, as it prioritizes worker safety through informed decision-making and continuous improvement, directly addressing the root causes of the feedback while adhering to the employer's duty to provide a safe workplace. An approach that dismisses the feedback as mere complaints without investigation fails to acknowledge the potential for genuine safety gaps or training deficiencies. This is a regulatory failure because it neglects the employer's responsibility to ensure PPE is adequate and that employees understand its use, as required by standards like 29 CFR 1910-132. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of care for employee well-being and can foster a culture of distrust. Another incorrect approach, immediately replacing all PPE based on anecdotal feedback without a thorough hazard assessment or review of the original selection criteria, is also problematic. This can lead to the selection of less effective PPE, potentially increasing risk and violating the principle of selecting PPE that is appropriate for the hazard. It also represents a failure to follow a systematic, evidence-based approach to safety management, which is implicitly expected under regulatory frameworks. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on enforcing existing rules without understanding the feedback's context risks alienating workers and failing to identify opportunities for improvement. While enforcement is necessary, a rigid, unyielding stance can undermine the collaborative effort required for a robust safety culture and may overlook valid concerns that, if addressed, could enhance overall safety compliance and effectiveness. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with active listening and data collection from stakeholders. This should be followed by a rigorous analysis of the feedback against established hazard assessments and regulatory requirements. The process should then involve a review of existing controls, including PPE selection and training, and a determination of whether adjustments are necessary. Any proposed changes must be justified by hazard mitigation and compliance, and communicated transparently to all stakeholders. Question 11. Process analysis reveals that a manufacturing company is facing increased scrutiny regarding its safety record following a series of minor but recurring incidents. As the Certified Safety Director, CSD, you are tasked with evaluating the company's current approach to safety management and corporate responsibility to ensure compliance and mitigate future risks. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates due diligence and fulfills the company's corporate responsibility obligations under the relevant regulatory framework? Option A. Implementing a comprehensive, documented system for hazard identification, risk assessment, control measures, and regular performance reviews, integrated into all operational processes and supported by adequate resources. Option B. Primarily focusing on investigating and rectifying issues only after incidents have been reported, and ensuring that all reported incidents are addressed in a timely manner. Option C. Conducting periodic, superficial safety audits to confirm adherence to basic regulatory checklists, without a deep integration of safety principles into daily operations. Option D. Allocating safety budgets based on immediate cost-saving opportunities, ensuring only the minimum legally mandated safety equipment is procured, even if higher risk levels are identified. The correct answer is A. Implementing a comprehensive, documented system for hazard identification, risk assessment, control measures, and regular performance reviews, integrated into all operational processes and supported by adequate resources. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a certified safety director, CSD, to navigate the complex interplay between proactive risk management and reactive legal obligations under the specified regulatory framework. The core of the challenge lies in demonstrating genuine due diligence, which goes beyond mere compliance with minimum standards to actively anticipating and mitigating potential harm. The CSD must balance the company's operational needs with its ethical and legal responsibilities to ensure a safe working environment, all while being prepared to defend the company's actions in the event of an incident. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and documented system of hazard identification, risk assessment, control implementation, and regular review, all aligned with the principles of corporate responsibility as enshrined in the relevant legislation. This proactive stance, demonstrating a commitment to safety that permeates the organization's culture and operations, is the hallmark of effective due diligence. It signifies that the company has taken all reasonable steps to prevent foreseeable harm, a key defense against allegations of negligence. An approach that focuses solely on responding to reported incidents, without a robust system for proactive identification and control, fails to meet the standard of due diligence. This reactive posture suggests a lack of foresight and a failure to implement preventative measures, which is a direct contravention of the spirit and letter of corporate responsibility laws that mandate a duty of care. Another incorrect approach is to rely on superficial compliance checks without genuine integration into operational processes. This can lead to a false sense of security and a failure to address systemic risks. Such an approach demonstrates a lack of commitment to true safety culture and can be easily exposed as inadequate during an investigation, as it shows a failure to embed safety into the fabric of the organization. Finally, an approach that prioritizes cost saving over necessary safety investments, even if technically compliant with some regulation, can be seen as a failure of corporate responsibility. The law expects companies to allocate sufficient resources to manage risks effectively. Prioritizing profit over safety, when it leads to an increased risk of harm, undermines due diligence and demonstrates a disregard for the well-being of employees and the public. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic risk management framework. This includes understanding the specific legal and regulatory obligations, establishing clear safety policies and procedures, implementing robust training programs, fostering a culture where safety concerns can be raised without fear of reprisal, conducting regular audits and inspections, and maintaining comprehensive records of all safety-related activities. When faced with a potential risk, the CSD must ask, have we done everything reasonably practicable to prevent this harm? And ensure the answer can be supported by evidence. Question 12. Governance review demonstrates that the organization's fire prevention and protection plan development process is being evaluated. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of proactive risk management and regulatory compliance for a certified safety director, CSD, operating under U.S. occupational safety and health regulations? Option A. Prioritizing the installation and maintenance of advanced fire suppression systems and detailed evacuation procedures, with less emphasis on identifying and mitigating the root causes of potential fires. Option B. Creating a static fire prevention and protection plan that is developed once and then filed, assuming that existing controls are sufficient unless a significant incident occurs. Option C. Focusing primarily on meeting the minimum prescriptive requirements outlined in relevant fire codes and standards, ensuring all required fire extinguishers and sprinkler systems are installed and maintained according to specifications. Option D. Developing a plan that comprehensively identifies potential fire hazards, assesses their associated risks, and implements a layered approach of preventative controls and emergency response measures, with provisions for regular review and updates based on operational changes and incident analysis. The correct answer is D. Developing a plan that comprehensively identifies potential fire hazards, assesses their associated risks, and implements a layered approach of preventative controls and emergency response measures, with provisions for regular review and updates based on operational changes and incident analysis. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because developing effective fire prevention and protection plans requires a nuanced understanding of both regulatory mandates and practical site-specific risks. A certified safety director, CSD, must balance compliance with the spirit and letter of the law with the unique operational realities of the organization. The challenge lies in moving beyond a checklist approach to a proactive, risk-based strategy that genuinely safeguards personnel and assets. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, integrated strategy that prioritizes hazard identification, risk assessment, and the implementation of layered controls, including both preventative measures and robust emergency response capabilities. This aligns with the fundamental principles of occupational safety and health regulations, which mandate employers to provide a safe working environment. Specifically, it reflects the proactive duty of care to anticipate and mitigate potential fire hazards before they escalate. This approach is ethically sound as it places the highest value on human life and well-being, and it is regulatorily compliant by addressing the root causes of fires and ensuring preparedness for inevitable incidents. An approach that focuses solely on meeting minimum prescriptive requirements without a thorough risk assessment is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of proactive hazard identification and a potential underestimation of specific risks present at the facility. It can lead to non-compliance with the general duty clauses of safety regulations that require employers to identify and control hazards, not just those explicitly listed. Furthermore, it is ethically deficient as it prioritizes superficial compliance over genuine safety. Another incorrect approach is to implement a plan that heavily emphasizes reactive measures, such as solely relying on fire suppression systems, without adequate preventative strategies. This is professionally flawed because it fails to address the primary objective of fire prevention. Regulations typically require a hierarchy of controls, with elimination and substitution of hazards being preferred over reliance on personal protective equipment or emergency response. Ethically, this approach is problematic as it places a greater burden on emergency responders and potentially increases the risk of injury or fatality by not adequately preventing fires from starting. A third incorrect approach is to develop a plan that is not regularly reviewed and updated based on operational changes or incident learnings. This is professionally deficient because it creates a static document that may become irrelevant or ineffective as the workplace evolves. Regulatory frameworks often imply a continuous improvement cycle for safety management systems. Ethically, failing to update plans means the organization is not adapting to new risks, potentially endangering its workforce. A professional decision-making process for developing fire prevention and protection plans should involve 1. Understanding the specific regulatory framework applicable to the jurisdiction. 2. Conducting a thorough site-specific hazard identification and risk assessment process, considering all potential ignition sources, fuel sources, and oxidizing agents. 3. Developing a hierarchy of controls, prioritizing elimination and substitution, followed by engineering controls, administrative controls, and finally, personal protective equipment. 4. Integrating robust emergency preparedness and response plans, including evacuation procedures, fire drills, and communication protocols. 5. Establishing a system for regular review, auditing, and updating of the plan based on changes in operations, new technologies, incident investigations, and regulatory updates. 6. Ensuring adequate training and competency for all personnel involved in fire prevention and emergency response. Question 13. System analysis indicates that a production supervisor has requested a temporary deviation from the standard lockout/tagout (LOTO) procedure for a critical piece of machinery. The supervisor claims that a full LOTO would significantly delay production and that the maintenance team can be careful during the short maintenance window. As the Certified Safety Director, CSD, what is the most appropriate best practice approach to evaluate and address this request, adhering strictly to U.S. regulatory frameworks? Option A. Allow the supervisor to proceed with the maintenance after a brief verbal discussion, relying on their assurance that the team will exercise caution and minimize risks. Option B. Permit the deviation based on the supervisor's assessment of minimal risk and the potential for significant production delays. Assuming the maintenance team is experienced. Option C. Require a formal documented hazard analysis of the proposed deviation, including the implementation of equivalent or enhanced safety controls, and secure explicit authorization from the safety department and affected employees before any deviation is permitted. Option D. Deny any deviation from the LOTO procedure outright, regardless of the potential production impact or the feasibility of alternative safety measures, and insist on the full standard procedure being followed. The correct answer is C. Require a formal documented hazard analysis of the proposed deviation, including the implementation of equivalent or enhanced safety controls, and secure explicit authorization from the safety department and affected employees before any deviation is permitted. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in safety management, ensuring strict adherence to established procedures in a dynamic operational environment. The professional challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for production with the paramount importance of worker safety, particularly when deviations from standard operating procedures, SOP, are proposed. The Certified Safety Director, CSD, must exercise sound judgment, relying on regulatory mandates and best practices to prevent potentially catastrophic incidents. The correct approach involves a thorough review and approval process for any proposed deviation from established lockout/tagout (LOTO) procedures. This process must include a documented hazard analysis to identify the risks associated with the proposed change, the implementation of equivalent or enhanced safety controls, and explicit authorization from all affected parties, including the safety department and affected employees. This aligns with the fundamental principles of OSHA LOTO Standard 29 CFR 1910-147, which mandates that employers establish a program to ensure that machinery is rendered inoperable before maintenance or servicing. The standard requires that employees be trained on the purpose and function of LOTO procedures, and that procedures be developed for specific equipment. Any deviation must be justified and controlled to maintain the integrity of the safety program. An incorrect approach would be to allow a supervisor to unilaterally authorize a temporary deviation based on their assessment of minimal risk, without a formal documented review and approval process. This bypasses critical safety checks and undermines the established LODO program, violating the employer's responsibility to ensure a safe working environment as required by OSHA. It creates a precedent for future noncompliance and increases the likelihood of an LODO failure, potentially leading to serious injury or fatality. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the maintenance without any deviation from the LODO procedure, even if it significantly impedes production. While adherence to LODO is crucial, the standard also allows for the development of specific procedures for certain types of servicing and testing, where LODO may not be feasible, provided that alternative measures are implemented to protect employees. Simply refusing to deviate without considering alternative, equally effective safety measures can be counterproductive and may not represent the most effective safety management practice if a documented, risk-assessed alternative exists. Finally, accepting a verbal assurance from the maintenance team that they will be careful and not fully implement LODO is a grave error. This relies on subjective judgment rather than objective, documented safety controls and violates the core principle of LODO, which is to physically prevent the unexpected energization or startup of machinery. Verbal assurances are insufficient to meet regulatory requirements and provide no recourse or accountability in the event of an incident. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the specific regulatory requirements, in this case, OSHA LODO standard. They must then conduct a comprehensive risk assessment of the proposed deviation, considering the potential hazards and the effectiveness of proposed alternative controls. A robust management of change process, which includes documentation, review, and authorization by all relevant stakeholders, is essential. This ensures that safety is integrated into operational decisions and that any deviations are controlled and justified, maintaining the highest level of worker protection. Question 14. Benchmark analysis indicates that a new manufacturing process has been implemented across a production line without a formal hazard identification and risk assessment being completed. The production manager is eager to meet increased demand and is pushing for full integration of the new process immediately, suggesting that existing safety protocols should be sufficient. As the Certified Safety Director, CSD, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with regulatory frameworks and protect worker safety? Option A. Implement the new process with a temporary waiver, allowing operations to continue while a risk assessment is initiated, with the understanding that any incidents will be investigated thoroughly. Option B. Proceed with the full integration of the new process, relying on the production manager's assurance that existing safety protocols are adequate, and schedule a risk assessment for the next quarter. Option C. Immediately halt the integration of the new process until a comprehensive, documented risk assessment is completed and appropriate control measures are identified and implemented. Option D. Conduct a brief, informal walkthrough of the new process with the production team to identify any obvious hazards and proceed with integration if none are apparent. The correct answer is C. Immediately halt the integration of the new process until a comprehensive, documented risk assessment is completed and appropriate control measures are identified and implemented. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because the Certified Safety Director, CSD, must navigate a situation where a new process has been implemented without a formal risk assessment, potentially exposing workers to unknown hazards. The urgency to maintain operational efficiency conflicts with the fundamental safety obligation to protect personnel. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands while adhering strictly to regulatory requirements. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough, documented risk assessment of the new process before it is fully integrated into operations. This aligns with the core principles of hazard identification and risk management mandated by regulatory frameworks such as OSHA General Duty Clause 29 CFR 1910-141, which requires employers to provide a workplace free from recognized hazards. A formal risk assessment systematically identifies potential hazards, evaluates their severity and likelihood, and determines appropriate control measures. This proactive approach ensures that risks are understood and managed before incidents occur, fulfilling the CSD's ethical and legal responsibilities. An incorrect approach would be to rely on informal discussions or the assumption that existing controls are sufficient. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement for a systematic and documented hazard identification and risk assessment process. It bypasses the critical step of evaluating new or modified processes for potential hazards, leaving workers exposed to unmanaged risks. Ethically, this demonstrates a disregard for due diligence and a failure to prioritize worker safety. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the new process while deferring the risk assessment to a later date, perhaps after an incident has occurred. This is a reactive and unacceptable safety strategy. Regulations require employers to anticipate and mitigate hazards, not to wait for harm to manifest. Delaying a risk assessment under these circumstances constitutes a direct violation of the employer's responsibility to provide a safe working environment and undermines the CSD's role in proactive safety management. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Immediately recognizing the regulatory and ethical imperative to conduct a risk assessment for any new or modified process. 2. Prioritizing safety over immediate operational expediency when potential hazards are present. 3. Communicating the necessity of the risk assessment to management, clearly outlining the regulatory requirements and potential consequences of noncompliance. 4. Developing a plan to conduct the assessment efficiently without unduly delaying essential operations, if possible, but never compromising the integrity of the assessment itself. 5. Documenting all steps taken, including the rationale for any decisions made regarding the process's implementation timeline relative to the risk assessment. Question 15. The control framework reveals that the organization has implemented a system for tracking workplace incidents. The Certified Safety Director, CSD, is evaluating the effectiveness of this system in identifying and mitigating potential hazards. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates a robust and compliant method for tracking and trending incident data? Option A. Reviewing the total number of incidents recorded over the past year to assess the overall safety performance. Option B. Analyzing the frequency of reported incidents by department and comparing it to industry benchmarks to identify areas requiring immediate attention. Option C. Relying on supervisor feedback to identify recurring safety concerns without formal data analysis. Option D. Implementing a detailed incident reporting form that captures extensive qualitative information, but lacks a structured method for quantitative trend analysis. Correct answer is B. Analyzing the frequency of reported incidents by department and comparing it to industry benchmarks to identify areas requiring immediate attention. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a Certified Safety Director, CSD, is tasked with evaluating the effectiveness of incident tracking and trending methodologies within a specific regulatory context. The challenge lies in ensuring that the chosen methods not only comply with the applicable regulations, but also provide actionable insights for proactive risk management. The CSD must demonstrate a deep understanding of how data collection, analysis, and reporting contribute to a robust safety management system, moving beyond mere compliance to genuine safety improvement. Careful judgment is required to discern between superficial data collection and meaningful trend analysis that can prevent future incidents. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the organization's incident data collection processes, focusing on the accuracy, completeness, and consistency of reported information. This includes verifying that all reportable incidents are captured, that root causes are thoroughly investigated, and that the data is categorized appropriately for trend analysis. The CSD should then assess the methods used to identify recurring patterns, such as frequency of specific incident types, common contributing factors, or high-risk work areas. This approach is justified by the regulatory framework's emphasis on proactive hazard identification and risk reduction, which necessitates accurate and insightful data analysis. For instance, regulations often mandate the reporting and investigation of certain incidents, implying a need to understand their underlying causes and prevent recurrence. Effective trending allows for the allocation of resources to address systemic issues before they lead to more severe outcomes, aligning with the ethical duty of a safety professional to protect workers. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the volume of incidents reported without analyzing the underlying causes or trends. This fails to meet regulatory expectations for proactive risk management and can lead to a false sense of security or misallocation of resources. Ethically, it neglects the duty to identify and mitigate hazards effectively. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on anecdotal evidence or subjective interpretations of incident data rather than systematic analysis. This lacks the rigor required by regulatory bodies and can result in biased conclusions, undermining the credibility of the safety program. It also fails to leverage the full potential of data for informed decision-making. A further incorrect approach would be to implement a tracking system that is overly complex or burdensome, leading to incomplete or inaccurate data entry. While seemingly thorough, such a system can become a barrier to effective data collection, rendering the trending efforts unreliable and non-compliant with the spirit of regulatory requirements for accurate record-keeping. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the organization's current safety data management practices against regulatory requirements and best practices. This includes understanding the specific reporting obligations, the desired outcomes of incident investigation, and the analytical tools available. The CSD should prioritize methods that ensure data integrity, facilitate meaningful trend identification, and support evidence-based decision-making for continuous improvement in safety performance. Question 16. The monitoring system demonstrates an oxygen level below the acceptable limit for confined space entry and elevated levels of a known toxic gas. What is the immediate and most appropriate course of action for the certified safety director? Option A. Dismiss the readings as potentially faulty due to equipment malfunction and proceed with entry after a visual inspection of the space. Option B. Immediately halt all entry operations, secure the space, and initiate a thorough investigation into the cause of the atmospheric conditions, including verification of monitoring equipment and implementation of necessary controls before any further entry is considered. Option C. Allow entry to proceed but instruct entrants to wear supplied air respirators and to exit immediately if symptoms of exposure are felt. Option D. Proceed with entry after a brief period of forced ventilation, assuming the readings were transient and will self-correct. The correct answer is B. Immediately halt all entry operations, secure the space, and initiate a thorough investigation into the cause of the atmospheric conditions, including verification of monitoring equipment and implementation of necessary controls before any further entry is considered. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires immediate, critical decision-making under conditions of uncertainty regarding atmospheric hazards in a confined space. The Certified Safety Director, CSD, must balance the urgency of operations with the paramount duty to protect worker safety, adhering strictly to established regulatory frameworks. The decision hinges on interpreting real-time data against predefined safety parameters and understanding the implications of each potential action. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven response that prioritizes hazard elimination and worker protection. This means immediately halting operations and initiating a thorough investigation of the atmospheric readings. This aligns with the fundamental principles of occupational safety and health regulations, which mandate that employers identify, evaluate, and control hazards. Specifically, regulations governing confined space entry e.g. OSHA 29 CFR 1910, 146 in the U.S. context, assuming this is the relevant jurisdiction for the CSD exam, require that if atmospheric conditions exceed permissible exposure limits or present an oxygen deficiency, entry must be prohibited, and appropriate ventilation or other controls must be implemented before entry is permitted. The decision to halt entry and investigate is a direct application of the hierarchy of controls, prioritizing elimination and substitution of hazards. An incorrect approach that proceeds with entry despite elevated readings, even with the intention of immediate ventilation, fails to uphold the permit-required confined space entry procedures. This bypasses the critical pre-entry assessment and control measures mandated by regulations. It represents a failure to adhere to the principle of safety first and demonstrates a disregard for established protocols designed to prevent catastrophic incidents. Such an action could lead to serious injury or fatality, violating ethical obligations to protect employees and potentially incurring severe legal and financial penalties. Another incorrect approach, which involves relying solely on personal protective equipment, PPE, like respirators without addressing the root cause of the atmospheric hazard, is also unacceptable. While PPE is a control measure, it is considered the last line of defense. Regulations emphasize controlling hazards at the source through engineering controls, like ventilation, or administrative controls before resorting to PPE. Relying solely on respirators in this context ignores the potential for rapid deterioration of atmospheric conditions and does not eliminate the underlying hazard, thus failing to meet the comprehensive safety requirements for confined space entry. A further incorrect approach, which involves assuming the readings are erroneous without independent verification or investigation, is a critical failure in due diligence. Regulations require that monitoring equipment be properly calibrated and maintained, and that readings be taken seriously. Dismissing potentially life-threatening data without a proper investigation demonstrates negligence and a lack of commitment to safety protocols. The professional decision-making process should involve a clear protocol for responding to atmospheric monitoring alerts. Halt operations, verify readings, investigate the cause, implement corrective actions, retest, and then, and only then, consider re-entry if all parameters are met. Question 17. The efficiency study reveals that the current manual process for hazardous material handling is time-consuming and costly. The operations manager proposes replacing it with an automated system, citing significant projected savings. However, the proposed automation involves modifications to the existing ventilation system and the introduction of new chemical dispensing equipment, which have not been fully assessed for their impact on air quality and potential for new exposure routes. As the certified safety director, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure both efficiency gains and continued regulatory compliance? Option A. Delegate the safety review of the automated system to the operations manager, trusting their judgment on efficiency and cost-effectiveness. Option B. Implement the automated system using existing safety protocols for hazardous materials, assuming the new equipment will not introduce significant new risks. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive hazard analysis and risk assessment of the proposed automated system, including its impact on ventilation and new equipment, before approving its implementation. Option D. Approve the implementation of the automated system immediately to realize cost savings, with a plan to address any safety concerns that may arise after the system is operational. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive hazard analysis and risk assessment of the proposed automated system, including its impact on ventilation and new equipment, before approving its implementation. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a certified safety director, CSD, to balance the immediate need for operational efficiency with the fundamental requirement of maintaining and improving safety standards. The pressure to reduce costs and streamline processes can inadvertently lead to the erosion of established safety protocols if not managed with a robust change management framework. The CSD must exercise careful judgment to ensure that proposed changes do not compromise worker well-being or regulatory compliance, even when faced with strong internal advocacy for expediency. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process for evaluating, implementing, and monitoring changes to safety procedures. This includes a thorough risk assessment of the proposed changes, stakeholder consultation, clear communication of new procedures, and post-implementation review to confirm effectiveness and identify any unintended consequences. This aligns with the core principles of continuous improvement mandated by regulatory frameworks that emphasize proactive hazard identification and risk control. Specifically, in the U.S. context, this would be guided by OSHA General Duty Clause 29 U.S.C. Section 654 A.1, which requires employers to provide a workplace free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm, and by the principles embedded in various OSHA standards that implicitly or explicitly require a structured approach to managing changes that affect workplace safety. Ethical considerations also demand that the CSD prioritize worker safety over short-term economic gains. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings without a comprehensive safety review fails to uphold the employer's legal and ethical obligations. This bypasses the essential risk assessment phase, potentially introducing new hazards or exacerbating existing ones, thereby violating the General Duty Clause and specific OSHA standards. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on informal communication and assumes existing safety knowledge is inadequate because it lacks the rigor of documented procedures and verification of understanding, which are crucial for effective safety management and compliance. This can lead to misinterpretations, omissions, and a breakdown in safety protocols. An approach that implements changes without any post-implementation review misses a critical opportunity for continuous improvement and fails to verify that the changes have achieved their intended safety outcomes, potentially leaving systemic issues unaddressed and violating the spirit of proactive safety management. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the full scope of proposed changes and their potential impact on safety. This involves consulting relevant regulations, conducting thorough risk assessments, engaging all affected stakeholders, and establishing clear metrics for success and monitoring. The process should be iterative, allowing for adjustments based on feedback and performance data, thereby fostering a culture of continuous improvement in safety. Question 18. The performance metrics show a significant increase in lost time injuries and a corresponding rise in workers' compensation claim durations over the past 2 quarters. As the certified safety director, which of the following actions would be the most appropriate and compliant response to manage this situation effectively? Option A. Reduce the frequency of safety inspections and audits to minimize the disruption to production, assuming that the increase in claims is a temporary fluctuation unrelated to underlying safety conditions. Option B. Implement a mandatory, company-wide retraining program focused on hazard recognition and reporting procedures, while simultaneously reviewing and streamlining the internal process for initial injury reporting and claim initiation to ensure prompt and accurate submission to the workers' compensation insurer. Option C. Advise employees to delay reporting minor injuries until they become more significant, thereby reducing the immediate number of reported incidents and potentially lowering short-term claim filing rates. Option D. Focus on aggressively challenging the validity of all new claims filed, requiring extensive documentation from employees and medical providers before any claim is processed, with the goal of reducing the overall number of accepted claims. The correct answer is B. Implement a mandatory, company-wide retraining program focused on hazard recognition and reporting procedures, while simultaneously reviewing and streamlining the internal process for initial injury reporting and claim initiation to ensure prompt and accurate submission to the workers' compensation insurer. Explanation. The performance metrics show a concerning trend in the number of reported workplace injuries and the subsequent workers' compensation claims filed. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a certified safety director, CSD, to not only identify the root causes of these incidents, but also to implement effective strategies for managing the claims process in a way that is compliant with all applicable regulations, fair to employees, and fiscally responsible for the organization. CSD must balance the immediate needs of injured workers with the long-term goals of injury prevention and claims cost containment, all while adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing workers' compensation in the relevant jurisdiction. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive strategy that begins with thorough incident investigation to determine root causes, followed by the implementation of corrective actions to prevent recurrence. Crucially, it includes establishing clear, compliant procedures for reporting injuries, filing claims promptly and accurately, and maintaining open communication with injured employees, healthcare providers, and the workers' compensation insurer. This approach is justified by regulatory requirements that mandate timely reporting and accurate claim submission, as well as ethical obligations to support injured workers and ensure they receive benefits to which they are entitled. Furthermore, effective claims management, including early intervention and return-to-work programs, is essential for mitigating costs and demonstrating a commitment to employee well-being, which aligns with the CSD's overarching responsibility for workplace safety and health. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on reducing the number of reported injuries without addressing underlying safety deficiencies would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to underreporting of incidents, which violates reporting requirements and deprives employees of necessary benefits. Another incorrect approach, such as delaying or disputing legitimate claims without proper investigation, would violate both regulatory mandates for fair claims processing and ethical duties to injured workers. Furthermore, failing to establish clear communication channels or provide adequate support to injured employees during the claims process can lead to dissatisfaction, increased stress, and potential legal challenges, all of which undermine the CSD's role and the organization's commitment to safety. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic review of performance data, a deep dive into incident investigation findings, and a thorough understanding of the applicable workers' compensation laws and regulations. The CSD must then develop and implement a multifaceted strategy that prioritizes injury prevention, compliant claims management, and effective communication. This involves collaborating with relevant stakeholders, including HR, legal counsel, and insurance providers, to ensure a coordinated and effective response. Continuous monitoring and evaluation of the implemented strategies are also critical to adapt to changing circumstances and ensure ongoing compliance and effectiveness. Question 19. The evaluation methodology shows that a new automated packaging machine has been introduced into the facility, which operates at high speeds and utilizes a novel robotic arm with pinch points. While current regulations do not explicitly detail safety requirements for this specific type of robotic arm, the Certified Safety Director, CSD, is tasked with ensuring its safe operation. Which of the following approaches best interprets and applies the existing regulatory framework to this scenario? Option A. Prioritize the immediate integration of the new machine into the production line to meet output targets, deferring any detailed safety review until after the initial production run is complete. Option B. Assume the machine is safe to operate as it is, since no specific regulations address its unique features, and wait for an incident to occur before investigating potential safety improvements. Option C. Conduct a thorough hazard assessment of the new machine. Identify potential risks associated with the robotic arm's pinch points and high-speed operation, and implement appropriate controls based on the hierarchy of controls, drawing from general principles of machine guarding and lockout/tagout procedures. Option D. Rely solely on the machine manufacturer's basic operating manual for safety guidance, without conducting an independent risk assessment or considering site-specific operational factors. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough hazard assessment of the new machine, identify potential risks associated with the robotic arm's pinch points and high-speed operation, and implement appropriate controls based on the hierarchy of controls, drawing from general principles of machine guarding and lockout/tagout procedures. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for a Certified Safety Director, CSD, where a new process introduces potential hazards not explicitly covered by existing, older regulations. The professional challenge lies in the CSD's responsibility to ensure worker safety proactively, even when direct regulatory guidance is ambiguous or absent. This requires a deep understanding of the spirit of the regulation, not just their literal text, and the ability to apply established safety principles in novel situations. Careful judgment is required to balance operational needs with the paramount duty of care to employees. The correct approach involves a thorough hazard assessment of the new process, identifying potential risks, and then applying the hierarchy of controls to mitigate those risks. This aligns with the fundamental principles of occupational safety and health legislation, which mandate employers to provide a safe working environment. Specifically, it draws upon the general duty clauses found in many regulatory frameworks, e.g., the OSH Act in the U.S., which requires employers to furnish a place of employment free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm, and the proactive risk management principles emphasized in modern safety management systems. The CSD must interpret the intent of the regulations to prevent harm and implement controls that achieve this intent, even if the specific hazard isn't listed. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the absence of specific regulations for the new process is a critical failure. This demonstrates a lack of proactive risk management and a narrow, literal interpretation of the law, which can lead to serious accidents and legal liability. It ignores the overarching legal and ethical obligation to protect workers. Another incorrect approach, which prioritizes immediate operational efficiency over a comprehensive safety review, is also unacceptable. This approach subordinates safety to production, a direct contravention of regulatory intent and ethical responsibility. It fails to recognize that operational efficiency cannot be achieved at the expense of worker well-being. Finally, an approach that delegates the entire responsibility for hazard identification and control to the operational supervisor without the CSD's expert oversight is flawed. While supervisors have a role, the CSD's specialized knowledge and regulatory mandate require their active involvement in ensuring compliance and best practices. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Proactive identification of new processes or changes that may introduce hazards. 2. A systematic hazard identification and risk assessment process, utilizing established methodologies. 3. Application of the hierarchy of controls elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, personal protective equipment, to mitigate identified risks. 4. Consultation with relevant stakeholders, including workers and management. 5. Documentation of the assessment and control measures. 6. Continuous monitoring and review of the effectiveness of implemented controls. This systematic approach ensures that safety is integrated into operational changes from the outset, fulfilling both legal and ethical obligations. Question 20. What factors determine the effectiveness of an occupational health and safety program in a complex industrial setting, beyond simply reviewing compliance documentation and incident rates? Option A. The volume of safety training hours delivered annually and the number of safety committee meetings held. Option B. The completeness of the safety manual and the frequency of management safety audits. Option C. The extent to which the program actively involves frontline workers in hazard identification and risk assessment, alongside observable adherence to safety procedures and the proactive identification and control of emerging risks. Option D. The reduction in the number of minor first aid incidents reported over the past year. The correct answer is C. The extent to which the program actively involves frontline workers in hazard identification and risk assessment, alongside observable adherence to safety procedures and the proactive identification and control of emerging risks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a certified safety director, CSD, to evaluate the effectiveness of an existing occupational health and safety OS program without relying on simple metrics or readily available data. The challenge lies in moving beyond superficial compliance to a genuine assessment of risk reduction and worker well-being. A CSD must exercise critical judgment to discern whether the program is merely ticking boxes or actively fostering a robust safety culture and demonstrably mitigating hazards. The absence of clear, quantifiable data necessitates a more qualitative and observational approach, demanding a deep understanding of OHS principles and best practices. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, multifaceted evaluation that integrates qualitative and quantitative data, focusing on observable behaviors, worker feedback, and the proactive identification and control of hazards. This approach is right because it aligns with the fundamental principles of OHS management systems, which emphasize continuous improvement and a holistic view of safety. Specifically, it reflects the spirit of regulations that mandate not just the existence of a safety program, but its effectiveness in preventing injuries and illnesses. This involves reviewing incident investigation reports for root causes, observing safety practices in action, soliciting feedback from frontline workers about perceived risks and program efficacy, and assessing the adequacy of training and resource allocation. This method ensures that the evaluation is grounded in real-world conditions and worker experience, leading to actionable insights for improvement. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that solely relies on reviewing readily available compliance documentation, such as permits and inspection logs, is incorrect because it focuses on the *existence* of procedures rather than their *effectiveness*. This fails to address whether these documented procedures are actually being followed or if they are sufficient to control identified hazards. It represents a superficial compliance mindset, which is ethically and regulatorily deficient as it does not demonstrate a genuine commitment to worker safety beyond meeting minimum legal requirements. An approach that prioritizes the review of lagging indicators, such as lost time injury rates, without considering leading indicators or the underlying causes, is also incorrect. Lagging indicators are important, they only reflect past performance. Focusing solely on them means the evaluation is reactive rather than proactive. This approach fails to identify systemic issues or emerging risks before they result in harm, which is a failure to meet the proactive duty of care expected of a CSD. An approach that exclusively depends on management's perception of the program's success, without seeking input from frontline workers or conducting direct observations, is fundamentally flawed. Management may have a biased perspective or be unaware of the practical challenges faced by employees. This approach neglects the crucial element of worker participation, which is often a regulatory requirement and an ethical imperative for effective OHS. It risks overlooking critical hazards and failing to implement controls that are practical and effective in the workplace. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the overarching OHS objectives and regulatory expectations. This involves identifying the scope of the evaluation and the specific hazards and risks present in the workplace. The next step is to determine the most appropriate data collection methods, which should be a blend of qualitative and quantitative approaches, ensuring that both leading and lagging indicators are considered. Crucially, worker involvement and feedback must be integrated throughout the process. The evaluation should then analyze the collected data to identify strengths, weaknesses, and areas for improvement, focusing on root causes rather than symptoms. Finally, recommendations for corrective actions should be developed, prioritized, and communicated effectively to relevant stakeholders, with a plan for monitoring their implementation and effectiveness.